Welcome and aloha. I'm Mark Shklov, the host of ThinkTech Hawaii's Law Across the Sea program. Today we're going across the sea to Turkey to talk with Turkish lawyer Emre Aslan. On the 6th of February 2023, Turkey suffered devastating earthquakes, which caused the loss of many lives and left many families in crisis. And we mourn with the families of the victims, especially in Hawaii, where we have a lot of empathy for people around the world. I've asked Emre Aslan to share his personal and professional perspectives of this tragedy. Hello, Emre. I appreciate you being my guest today.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's great to be here.
Emre is a senior lawyer in the Antroya Law Office located in Istanbul, Turkey. And
Yes.
Before we get into more details, I'd like you to please give me a brief description of your law firm and your law practice, and we can put up your logo information at the same time.
Well, to sum up quickly, Antroya established in 2005 in Turkey, based in Istanbul, as you mentioned. And we currently have an office in Virginia, Reston also. We have two offices and also an office in Eindhoven, Netherlands. So we work in almost all of the Europe, in Turkey, and the United States with our branches, while also working with more than 300 solution partners in 130 countries. So we basically cover the whole world. Our main areas of practice are international debt collection and litigation. Besides that, we also give credit reports, address traces, and even immigration services, which is related to the country. For example, we give immigration services in the United States and Europe, and in Turkey, where our branches are. So the main areas of our practice is the international debt collection, and we give our clients the most satisfactory service we can for almost 20 years.
You know, and one thing I noticed is that you have just a broad connections all over the world, and I think that says something about lawyers too. That just came to me as you were talking, that lawyers, cross all boundaries and talk to one another and help each other also. Now I want to focus right now on the tragedies that happened recently in Turkey. And what can you tell us about the current death toll, the property destruction in Turkey as a result of the massive earthquakes that struck earlier this month?
Well, according to the official numbers, there's been more than 30,000 houses collapsed, and more than 40,000 people died, and more than 80,000 people have been injured. But as I said, those are official numbers. And most of the people believe that the government hides the actual numbers from the people in order to get rid of any kind of a revolt. And most of the people believe that there are more than hundreds of thousands of deaths and almost 1 million of injured people. Because in that area, which we will talk afterwards, there were almost 1 of 4 people in Turkey lives in. It's almost equal to 13 million people. With an earthquake this devastating, it's almost impossible to come up with just as close as 40,000 people there.
Wow. So there, from what you tell me, there is a conflict in a way. I don't know the best way to say it, but the numbers that are being put out by the government are not necessarily complete.
Yes, and let's just say that the declaration of the government and the opinion of the people differs at that point.
And the people have really been affected as we watch the news every day. Now, I was wondering about you and your partners. Do you have any personal connections to family or friends or colleagues in the area that was devastated by the earthquakes?
Well, I'm from Malatya, by the way. My mother and father are from Malatya. I'm from Malatya, which the earthquake happened in that place also. And we had distant relatives whose house were collapsed, and we had to get back to there and bring them up. Luckily, we have managed to do that. But other than that, there's none of my colleague and none of my partners or friends have been injured or their distant relatives. But as I said, I was from Malatya. My family was from Malatya, and our distant relatives' houses were collapsed. And we have to get back to there and bring them up and get back to Istanbul as soon as possible.
And if we put up a map of the
Mhm.
earthquake area,
Mhm.
I can see Malatya up on the sort of to the right of the
Mhm.
star. Is that correct?
Indeed, upper right corner of that area. Yes.
And that's where you're from.
Yes. Yes, that's where I'm from.
Hmm. Okay. Well, that's brings it right home to you, doesn't it?
Indeed.
It makes it very personal. I mean, it is personal just being from Turkey. I would think it's personal just being from the world, but that's your home and your family and your parents, right?
Of course, of course. As you are in Hawaii, you may be familiar with earthquakes, and you know how people feel in an accident like this.
Right. We felt them here, but nothing comparable to what you've had. Now, by the way, did anyone predict these earthquakes or the tragic results that would happen? Was this somehow known before it happened?
Absolutely. Several geologists and engineers predicted it like years ago. The most famous ones like Naci Görür or Celal Şengör predicted that one like 4 or 5 years ago. They even submitted projects to the government in order to get rid of the effects of that earthquake, but the government disregarded and did not take into consideration of those projects. After this earthquake happened, the geologists and engineers went up to the programs, to shows, like I did, and declared that they stated the earthquake may happen in that place, and they have submitted projects to the government institutions, but the administration denied to take consideration those projects, and this also made people really angry about that government's action.
Well, I can sense from our discussion so far that there is um, an argument going on here between the population and the government concerning this. Was Turkey prepared for these earthquakes and the resulting destruction at all?
Unfortunately, Turkey was not prepared for those earthquakes. Turkey was not prepared in 1999 either, in Gölcük earthquake. The government's action is basically reactive rather than being proactive. So it's based on taking action after the mistake or the accident is happened. And for the last couple of years, the government was preparing for a zoning piece, which covers almost all of the Turkey. But since construction engineers use cheaper materials in order to get profit, and government do not inspect those constructions, this mistake happened again, and that's why the earthquake had such fatal consequences.
Well, that's very remarkable to hear that information. What is being done right now in Turkey to address the tragedy that's happened?
Well, the most of the addresses and helps comes from the NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and helps from the people instead. For example, we prepared a package to send it to Hatay, to a place which the most damage is made, and Kahramanmaraş. And most of the people in our village, in our area, prepared packages in order to send some help. They submitted those packages to the non-governmental organizations, some organization named AHBAP, for example, if you might want to take a look at afterwards. And those organizations sent the packages to the relevant places. Uh, as you may know, the government have its own organization called Disaster and Emergency Management Presidency, in abbreviation AFAD. But people do not believe that the helps which we made through AFAD would not really be provided to the earthquake victims. Therefore, most of the people work with NGOs rather than working with governmental organizations. But also the presidency is doing his own procedure. They try to evacuate people from the place. Until now, almost 150,000 people are evacuated from that earthquake zone, and they're trying to do our best also.
So what I hear you telling me is that people, not the government, is being more active in addressing the tragedy and helping, and that's what people of Turkey have more faith in, is NGOs and other folks, as opposed to the government. Is that is that correct?
That's correct? Yes, you're right. You're right. Unfortunately, the belief of the people to government is recently faded. And as you may know, there is an election coming up on May, and the government may hide anything that would make their percentage go down. Therefore, the people do not believe them because they may do anything to keep their political position.
So, besides this earthquake tragedy and the tremendous loss of life, which has affected the world, really, there is a governmental and a political issue going on in Turkey too that I was not aware of. Is that accurate?
Yes, the current administration is on their place for more than 20 years, and just a generation grow up with that administration, and most of the people look at that election as a last chance.
Ah, okay, yes. All right. So then, go ahead.
Let's think about this. In an instance, the government addresses the earthquake victims, and in conclusion, they state that the death toll is like 500,000, the injury toll is like 1 million, and hundreds of thousands of houses are collapsed. In that instance, they may actually go down from the presidency. So that's why they hide the numbers, just like they did in COVID, by the way. In the pandemic, the government stated that the actual toll, death toll and injury toll, is lower than the NGOs are declared. For example, some of the NGOs declared that Turkey had more than a couple of millions of deaths in the pandemic, but the government said it's also 100 or 150,000.
So I see there are two issues facing Turkey at this time. Now, with respect to the earthquake, what is needed to be done on the ground to address the tragedy right now?
Well, for now, most of the earthquake victims need a place to stay and food. In the first couple of days, the government did not have any chance to bring help to those earthquake victims, and they were lack of coordination. Therefore, the people had to bring up with their solutions themselves. For example, in that area, which is called the Southeast Anatolia, is somewhere called an alluvional plain. In an alluvional plain, the soil is really soft and is not fit for construction. Therefore, most of the houses there was like one level or two level buildings. But there were buildings with more than 15 or 16 levels also, which most of them collapsed after the earthquake. As you can see, there are some buildings with more than 10 or 11 levels, which is not fit for that soil, which is not fit for that area, and which the government gave license to that construction. So in that kind of instance, where the presidency did not bring any help, most of the people tried to bring up their help, bring up their working machine and try to dig up the collapsed building and get back their people. But as I said, the two of the most needed things are a place to stay and food, because the weather is like -10, -15 degrees in the night.
You know, a lot of the coverage is of those photos of the collapsed buildings. And is it possible? Is the government addressing the people that are trapped, or is it too late? Or how are they dealing with the collapsed buildings and the loss of lives and the destruction?
Well, you may be familiar with that also, but the first 48 hours is crucial for rescuing. After that, in the weather that I mentioned before, in -10, -15 degrees, most of the people would freeze out of there. So people's hopes are really getting low after those 48 hours, and it's been almost a week. We do not believe, we do not have any belief that there may be anything would come up with a good.
Is the Turkish legal profession dealing with this? What is being done from the standpoint of lawyers in Turkey? I know in Hawaii, often lawyers get involved in these social matters on many levels. What is the Turkish legal profession doing?
Well, the Turkish legal professional generally handles this matter via the bar associations, such as Istanbul Bar Association, Ankara Bar Association, Turkish Union of Bar Associations. They brought up a joint letter to the Ministry of Justice in order to detect the evidence, because as you may know, the construction sites are legally binding as an evidence. In order to get the prosecution process against the contractors and the governmental entities, the evidence has to be detected. It has to be detected that those constructions were made with a malpractice. So the bar association sent a joint letter to the Ministry of Justice to act as quickly as possible for that. If they would not do that in the meantime, like in a week or 2 weeks before the construction sites are getting lifted, they will not be able to get any evidence, and the responsible people might get away with it.
So yeah, I've seen that news articles that some Turkish contractors have been detained for the poor construction that caused a lot of the problems and the loss of life. And you say that Turkish lawyers are trying to preserve the evidence in that regard, in order to, I guess, would they take action? Is this action that would be taken by the government, or are this private action taken by Turkish attorneys against the contractors, or both? How does it work in Turkey?
It is actually both. It's a criminal proceeding. It's a governmental action, but it has to be brought up someone, anyone. It could be from anyone. It could be from me. It could be from you. It could be from any kind of legal or real entity. They just need a complaint regarding this matter. So all of the bar associations bring up with a joint complaint stating that there's a crime has been made in those kind of earthquake areas, and we need to detect the evidence as soon as possible in order to start with the criminal proceedings. After the detecting of those evidence, all the bar associations will send another complaint letter to the Ministry of Justice and to the prosecution authorities in order to start the investigating process with that evidence. After that, the prosecution will start.
So that is, I understand, and it sounds good that the bar associations are taking action. I hear that's what's going on. I also hear some concern that maybe the government is not responding.
Well, the government is not responding recently because of the political reasons I mentioned before.
I see.
And most of the ministries take action within President Erdogan's declarations and statements. If Erdogan would like to get into the prosecution immediately, then they would do also.
But they are holding contractors. Is that correct? I mean, contractors are being detained or are being held and not allowed to leave.
Yes, as you mentioned previously, the contractor of the Renaissance construction company has been detained at the airport. That was an example because the Renaissance company was a big company, one of the big 5 construction companies in the world also. And there are some more little companies which the constructors would be detained. There's some news about some detainees. It's I think it's exceeded 20 or 25 people for now, and it may exceed that. I think there will be more than 100 or 200 constructors to be detained.
And so, actually, a contractor was trying to leave the country.
Yes.
I see. I see. And now there is some action being taken. And when you talk about a civil action, will that be private lawsuits, or is this like a class action, or how does that work in Turkey?
There are 2 proceedings, private and public proceedings. Public proceedings includes criminal proceedings, which will be initiated by the prosecution authorities. And other than that, there are private proceedings. And as you may see, people's houses are collapsed, people are injured, people are damaged. They have to get compensated. That's the part of the private proceeding.
So,
And
so
mhm.
people in Turkey can do that. They can bring a private action.
Of course, they can. They can bring up with a complaint to the commercial courts or the main courts regarding they have been injured and they would like to get compensated. But they have to hire an attorney for that also. So I think the bar association will help any of the earthquake victims with free legal help.
Wow, that's great. I mean, and we do the same thing here in Hawaii. Our bar association, very similar. I'm very glad to hear that. I'm glad that lawyers are standing up and doing what seems to me like the right thing, and they're trying to preserve the evidence, and they're trying to make the people responsible who didn't build the houses correctly or the apartments correctly liable. Is that am I seeing that right?
Yes, you see that right, indeed.
Okay, good. Now I noticed also that from your Antroya law firm information, you have a lot of relations, and you mentioned this earlier, with international law associations. And has there been any response from those international lawyer associations or any contacts about what's happening? Has anything come from that?
Well, yes, thankfully for our partners, they have reached out to me directly as soon as possible, right after the earthquake happened, because they may not know that we are affected from the earthquake. But thanks again, I would be really thankful that they have reached out to us regarding this thing. We see that we see their kindness. We see that they take care of us, and thank you very much for them also. I don't know what to say about the situation.
Well, so the rest of the world seems to be concerned and wants to help. What can the rest of the world do? What can the rest of the world do to help Turkey now? What ideas do you have?
Well, till now, the rest of the world sent rescuing teams, including rescuing dogs, which were a lack of in Turkey, and they sent portable homes. They said they sent food supply for now, and because Turkey has made an international help call, some countries like Spain, Qatar, and France, and South American countries sent whatever they can. And most of those goods and practices are needed in Turkey. They were lacking in Turkey. We were not prepared for an accident like a tragedy like this. Therefore, we are so happy and thankful for the other countries for their help, for their assistance. But in conclusion, they sent rescuing teams, which were lack of, and they sent portable homes. That's what I mentioned previously. As you may remember, most of the earthquake victims need two essential things: a place to stay and food. That's what it comes.
And well, that's great. I mean, it's good to hear that people, regardless of what country they're from or their beliefs, are want to help other people in the world. To me, that's a great sign. And is that this what you would encourage them to continue doing if possible, providing this type of assistance? Is there anything else that was needed? Is there anything else that bar associations can do to help?
Well, for now, all we have to do is wait for the results, wait for the consequences to see what we have as a result. So, in order to predict how many people injured and died, and how many houses were collapsed, the amount of cases would differ by that. The bar association may help people in batch to provide them free legal help, and after that, people have their own chance to bring up with the prosecution proceedings, to bring up with the private lawsuits. There's no such thing as class action in Turkey legally, but people may bring up with their private cases, with their private lawsuits against the constructors. In the court process, the court would say that the earthquake victims have benefit to badge up those cases, but it's a low possibility. In conclusion, I think they may be brought up with their own cases and follow up with them their lawyers, which the Bar Association will provide.
Okay, I know we're in the middle of this, and so it's hard to look forward, but what does the future look like with respect to preventing similar tragedies resulting from earthquakes in Turkey? What do you see going forward?
Well, the future is so blurry. That's all I can say. As I mentioned previously, the political risks and the election in May will determine what the country's future will be. But in this kind of instances, for example, if there's any kind of earthquake would happen, I don't believe that Turkey is prepared for that. For example, the geologists and the engineers predicting that the next one is in Istanbul in a couple of years, with more than 7.2 to 7.6 Richters, which is pretty much for somewhere which in which 20 million people lives. So, for example, in 13 million people lives in that area, in the southeast Anatolia, where the earthquake happened, and people believe that almost a quarter of them died. If something like this would happen in Istanbul, I don't even want to consider consequences.
Is there anything that's being done in Istanbul? I mean, what you told me is shocking, frankly. I mean, because it was predicted, these earthquakes were predicted, and now they're predicting one in Istanbul. Is there anything that is being done?
Recently, as I previously mentioned, the government started a zone in peace, but this only provided the contractors to reconstruct the buildings that already been made again, which were just help them to make profit. Other than that, no, I don't think there is any preparation for it. In fact, most of the earthquake gathering zones, as you may know, gathering zones are the places where people would gather up after the earthquake happens, are open for construction for the last 2 years. So in Istanbul, if an earthquake happens, we do not have anywhere to go, anywhere to gather up after an earthquake, which is really bad for us. Other than that, legally, there are two ways to prosecute or follow up with legal matters in these construction issues. In Turkey, when a constructor approaches with a request to get a construct in an immovable asset, there is an inspector, a special inspector, which the contractor has to make an agreement with in order to inspect with those proceedings. The inspector has a liability to follow up every stage, every step of that construction, and report it to us. Report it to the governmental institutions, report it to the homeowners. Other than that, the governmental has to give relevant licensure to that constructor, to that contractor, in order to demolish a building and construct a building in an immovable asset. So, in an accident, in a tragedy, in such like this, all those inspection authorities, and the administrations are responsible just as much as the contractors. So, in conclusion, it's a bit more complicated than the way we expect.
Well, by the way, in Hawaii, we have had some issues with inspectors also, and has caused some consternation and potential legal action also. And so I understand what you're saying. And it sounds like these earthquakes have opened up much more than we knew about. We have about a minute left. Emre, is there anything that you would like to say in conclusion at this point about Turkey and what's happened?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for that opportunity again. It's a great opportunity to express our opinions regarding the earthquake. And because most of the media and television channels are in control of the government, therefore, almost none of the people would express their actual feelings about it. And we believe that the real consequences, the real results of that earthquake would be declared after the election if the government changes. But if the government does not change, we do not believe that anything would happen in this instance.
So there's more writing on this than we knew. But hearing the words from you, Emre Aslan, in Turkey is very important and helpful to understand the whole situation. So I thank you. I thank you for being my guest. I thank you for talking and telling us the straight story. Aloha, as we say in Hawaii.
Aloha.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.